And we stick it in the ground and we've got it planted, and we're selecting which limbs we're going to leave that first year. Those limbs, when they're really young, they're very flexible and malleable. And so I can actually take a toothpick or a clothespin, and I can clothespin right to my, I'm going to call this my central leader. This is the main axis of the tree. I can clothespin right here, and I put that pin just down here a little bit, and it just flattens that limb down. I'm going to leave it there for about 4 to 6 weeks. I'm going to come back in June, July. That limb now has a trajectory that's growing out and not up, and I can take that clothespin off of there. So when we're establishing those new trees, now we got that chance to shape that tree just how we want it. So a little bit of time and thought into which scaffolds I want. Remember scaffolds? Scaffolds are going to be my main branches that extend off of my central leader, where they are and what those crotch angles, that's going to pay a lot of dividends 5, 10 years down the road. The other thing, when limbs are flat, they'll grow fruit. When limbs are growing straight up and down or have real narrow crotch angles, they become more vegetative. And that means they just suck nutrients, they're nitrogen hounds, and they grow straight up and they make a bunch of leaves. If we want fruit earlier, we want to bend those limbs down, because that induces a change in the physiology of the tree, and it causes it to make fruit buds versus vegetative buds.
So, what did you just say, basically?
Put pinning them in, like taking a clothespin.
They
push
do.
down.
So you want them
Something
more
as big as that, instead of the clothespin idea, what you also see people
straighter
do
up ones.
is they'll take rubber bands or tie,
Just so
they can
this
gently
one.
flatten that, and that'll work.
Yeah, yeah.
In terms of what that limit is, it really depends on the flexibility. If the limb is too big, or if the crotch angle is already established too tight, and I start to try to bend it, a lot of times I'm just going to break it. And I've been guilty of that. You know, you think you can flatten something out, and you get it to about where you want, and you had talked earlier. So, again, thinking about that new tree you just got home from the nursery, the branches that extend from that central leader, we call those our scaffolds. And ideally, we want to have them kind of radially equal. So I don't want all 3 scaffolds coming off one side. I want to have a little balance. So if I were looking at an overhead view, it kind of looks like I've got one coming out at 9 o'clock, and another one coming out at 3 o'clock, and maybe one at 6 o'clock and one at 12 o'clock. And then I want to have a gap before I get to my next tier or my next level of scaffolds. I think on my diagram there I talked about 18 to 24 inches. So I got my first branches somewhere down here. I select 1, 2, 3, and then I cut everything else off. So I get rid of those. And then I go up here, and I'm not measuring with the tape measure out there, but I'm kind of estimating. If that's my first tier, I come up here to my next tier. I got 1, I got 2, ideally I'd have 3, and now I get rid of some of these other ones, because I want to prepare this tree to have some windows of sunlight coming in. I don't just want to have scaffolds lining up and down. It's going to be too much for the tree. It's going to be too much to grow a nice root system, and I'm going to end up with more fruit that's smaller and lower quality. So I want to spread this growth out, and I want to select where it is. One of the other pieces we look at, if you were to look at the diameter of these two, pretty similar. Yeah. This is my central leader. I don't want to have scaffolds that are the same size coming out of it, because it confuses the tree. And we want that central leader to be larger than the rest of those scaffolds. So the general rule of thumb is any scaffolds that are half the size or bigger, I'd take those out. Which isn't hard when we've got that brand new tree and those little scaffolds are coming off and they're kind of pencil size. That's real easy. But sometimes we have to go back. It slips our eye. We didn't realize it. The tree grows unbalanced. You know, right there, this one is in competition with this. If this was my central leader, I'd take this out right here, because I want that tree to know who's boss. And this is who's boss, that central leader. I don't want anything that's in direct competition with it. Does that kind of make sense a little bit when we're selecting for competition? Okay. I know we talked about we're looking at old, open centers, but a lot of us might go to the nursery and buy some new trees. And, when you get a chance to start from the ground floor, it's a lot easier. Yeah.
What about crossing branches and things that are rubbing?
Yeah.
Just gonna ask that.
So when we look at those easy cuts, we're getting rid of the dead, we're getting rid of the decaying, we're lowering the height. If we've got ones that are crossing, we're probably removing those too, because if they're going to rub on each other, they're going to create wounds and they're going to shade each other out. So those are an easy choice to make.
How do you decide which one of the crossing branches to get rid of? Like we got this guy over here, it's all cross.
Yeah. Which ones are you? Let's take a look and see if we can. As long as we're making cuts that are a 1/4 inch from the collar, that aren't leaving a stub, we're not going to do any harm here in the grand scheme of things. So don't be afraid to get in here and just open some stuff up. And right away, I got this thing that's growing right through all these. It's rubbing here, it's rubbing here. We're going to get rid of it. That's an easy one. So we'd get rid of that one right there. Okay? I'd come up here. If that one's gone, well, let's just get rid of this guy. Thank you, sir.
We did a before and after of this whole tree. Here's this. Oops, I'm sorry.
No problem. No problem.
That's
Sometimes
bigger than I thought.
we have to cut things out just so we can get things out. Excuse me.
Would you trim any differently with this tree with the trunk being split like that? I have a lot of old.
And nutrients down. As long as it's got any bit of that, it doesn't have to be all the way around. It's going to survive. I'd cut this off. Yep, for sure. But as long as I've got some cambium, and that cambium is that growing layer right underneath the bark, in some area on here, chances are it's going to make it. Anybody have voles or rabbits ever girdle a tree? Yeah. And a lot of times you think they're dead, and there'll be just one patch that for whatever reason they got too full and walked away, or maybe there was a stake in the way. That one little patch or bridge will be enough to supply that tree. It amazes me every year. And then on the other hand, they get all the way around, it's a goner. It won't die that spring. It'll die during the summer or the next year. So a lot of times I'll come out and I'll look and I'll see some, girdling damage, and I'll hope and pray, and it'll look and it'll bud out, and I'll think, oh, I got away with it. And the next year it dies. Because what happens is in that growing season, those leaves are photosynthesizing and they're trying to send those sugars down to the roots for the next year, and they can't get down there. So it lives that year, it dies the next.
And lawnmower-itis, right? The line trimmers. Don't
Yeah.
keep those away from your trucks.
Yeah, yep. And so thinking about that, if we're trying to get close here, we're gonna mow one management practice, mulch, either 18 inches or 24 inches or whatever you're comfortable with, so you don't feel like you have to get right up here with the lawnmower and the weed whip. That's gonna help dramatically. Yep.
Mulch is really good for the root system too, isn't it?
It's great for the root system. It locks in moisture. Yep.
But
So we're
not
keeping
too
that
much,
moist.
It'll rot.
What's
not
that?
Not too much mulch, or you might rot.
Yeah.
It might
You
cause
never
rot.
want mulch touching the actual tree.
Pull that mulch away just a few inches so you don't have direct contact, but provide a nice couple inches to keep in that moisture. It turns into organic matter, which benefits your soil. So again, I'm looking at stuff that's coming right up the middle. We're getting rid of that. I got these two right next to each other. This one's a little bit bigger. and I kind of like the fact that it's going to give me a little more opportunity. This one's crossing. I'm going to get rid of that.
What do you call your leader there?
I'd call my leader Lost. You know, this one doesn't have a real defined central leader. This is kind of an open center with two. If you wanted to get creative, you could probably select one of these and prune this back to a central leader tree if you wanted to. That would require you to make a decision and either take this one or that one. Remember when we talked over there and we talked about that direct competition that, you know, kind of confuses the tree? Right now this has two very distinct trees, which is fine. Given the shape of it and the age of it, I'd probably leave both of these and allow both of them to grow rather than select one. You're kind of trying to undo 20 years of growth, and that might be past the point. But if you've got some of these trees where, you know, if it does end up dying or doesn't turn out just perfect, but it's not going to be detrimental to you or really, you know, impinge, try some things. You know, the worst that happens is we have to come back and say, well, that didn't work, and we cut it out, or we shape that one. So don't be afraid to make some cuts if it's not something that, you know, be prepared. Gosh, if this dies, the whole yard is ruined. Well, then don't experiment on that one. So again, you know, kind of coming back here, I just want to vocalize some of the things I'm thinking about. Besides, you know, crossing ones, remember we talked about when they're all in a line like this and just trying to thin those out a little bit. So in my mind, as I'm cutting, I'm thinking, well, I got 1, 2, 3, 4. They're all right in a row. Let's just get rid of something in here. Try to leave a little less nub here.
Is the reason for the nubs the aesthetics of the tree, or is it a health of the tree?
It's a health of the tree. What I don't want to have are points of infection where something can come in and infect that. So I really want to try to get that down in that 1/4 inch range, something like that. And sometimes I have to go back and trim them. You just can't get the right angle with your loppers. You get what you can, and then as you come back, you say, well, geez, I really can do a better job there and better job there.
Sometimes by cutting further out a little bit, you don't get that bark peeling down. Unless you do the go back cut first on the bottom.
Right.
You can peel a nice piece of bark out. Have a bigger room.
Yes. Yep. So you don't want to have it where it, as it cuts free, it rakes down the side of it. What other questions, guys, as we're kind of thinking here and watching us massacre a little bit?
Well, I have a question in regards to pests. I've noticed porcupines chewing on my apple trees.
Yeah.
I don't know how to deter that. Anything.
You know, they make a number of different tree guards. So usually I'll start out as soon as I put a tree in the ground, I'll use those white plastic tree guards. Those are good for about the first 3-4 years. But then as that tree, as that caliper increases, you're going to start to pinch. So after about year 4 or 5, that white tree guard needs to come off. So if you're still worried about it, you can paint the tree. And in that paint, I will sometimes mix some drywall mud because the pests, the rodents, those things, they don't like the feel or the taste, that chalkiness on their teeth. Sometimes that'll work. If you're willing to spend some money or you don't have a whole lot of trees, they make some really sturdy tree guards that are going to be more in that size range. They're going to be more expensive. You know, for those little white ones, I'm paying 40 cents a tube. You're going to spend a couple dollars. But if you only have a few trees and that gives you peace of mind and you know nothing's getting in there, you know, by all means.
What about for these older trees, though?
I've seen people use like metal sheeting.
You could put that all like hardware cloth around there if you want. It's going to be a little bit, you know, time, labor intensive. What you don't want to do is put it right tight to it. You know, you need to leave a little bit of room in there.
Chicken wire. But loose.
Yep. you know, when we're just establishing those trees, and we need to get that leader above the browse line, we might put up some temporary fencing around that young tree so the deer can't come in and eat that. What deer, they want the nice tender growth. So they're gonna eat those new terminals out here, and that might not be great, but it's not the end of the world. What kills a tree is when they chomp on that central leader, and eventually they just kill that. So if you can put that claw or put that fence 6 feet out and give it a couple years and then remove it, you get that leader high enough now where it's out of reach and it's healthy.
I know it's a pruning class, but what about
Yeah, so I use both. I used to use more granulated synthetic, so I always do a soil test. I do a soil test and I do a leaf analysis. I try to do that in August. So in a soil test, I'm taking a soil probe, I'm going through the orchard, I'm picking about 15 different, trying to randomize spots, taking that soil core about 8 inches down, I'm putting in a bucket, I'm mixing that up, and I'm getting 2 cups of it, and I'm bringing it to either MSU or I'm bringing it to the Ellsworth Co-op.
MSU
Ellsworth
doesn't
sends
do
it
it
out,
anymore.
and they do the analysis. I'm also selecting leaves from my canopy, and I'm trying to, you know, get some old leaves, some young leaves, because different nutrients are going to be found in different concentrations in older versus young leaves. Some nutrients are mobile, some are immobile. My point being, don't just sit on the outside of the tree and grab all the little new leaves. Grab some from the outside, grab some from the inside, grab some low, grab some high, bag those up, because what's going on in the soil can be different than what's going on with the tree. So now I've got a picture of the foliar analysis and the soil analysis, and then I work with the agronomist, and they're going to come up with a recommendation. Hey, we need this many pounds of K, this many pounds of P, and this much nitrogen for the upcoming year. I switched to a compost-based system probably 5-6 years ago. So it's dairy dew, chicken litter, really stinks to high heaven, but we've seen good results with it. So I'm spreading that on in usually November, December. And then as I, you know,
under the drip line kind of thing? Yeah.
I'm putting those, I'm running through with a broadcaster, so it's just spraying out the back of the tractor. And then I'm going to start doing a foliar application with most of my sprays, and I'm using Triple 20. And it's a nutrient, it's a soluble based fertilizer, looks like Miracle-Gro. They tell me to run it 3 to 5 pounds to the acre. So I'm dumping about 3.5 pounds per acre in my spray tank, and that's feeding the leaves, that's feeding the tree through the leaves. So to answer your question, a combination.
Thank you.
Yep.
So you're fertilizing the tops of the trees? Did I get that right or no?
I'm
that last
fertilizing through the leaves.
Through
as
the
well.
leaves.
Yep. So I lay down some of my nutrients in the fall, so they're there when the tree starts to wake up right about now, and there's some good nutrients there to take up. And then starting in June, running through August, I'm also fertilizing through the foliage. And when I spray, it's absorbing some of those nutrients and it's carrying it into the tree as well. So 2 different modes of application, I guess. You know, to try to simplify it for a lot of us who maybe don't want to have that much invested in time and thinking about it, 2 cups of a real balanced fertilizer. When I say balanced, I mean like triple 16, triple 12, something like that. That's probably going to be real good for us. If I did half of that application, so if I'm doing 2 cups total, maybe I do half in March, and then I come back in June and I do my other half. And when I'm looking at this tree, I don't want to ring it all the way around here. Remember, what you see up here is just a mirror image of what's going on down beneath in the soil in terms of that root system, and I want to feed all those roots. So I've got a bucket in my hand, I got a scoop, I'm measuring about a cup, and I'm just broadcasting it out, trying to kind of reach underneath that tree. And then I'm going to come back in June, and I'm going to do another application. So total, I've put about 2 cups of that balanced fertilizer down. And for most of us, that's probably going to get us, some good healthy growth. Again, how much time, money, and energy you want to put in, there's all kinds of micronutrients and things that we can do. Just depends on, your level of what you want to do. 2 cups per tree. Now, for that young tree that we just planted, I'm going to knock that down that first couple years. I don't need that much because that root system is real small at that point. When we stick that tree in the ground, it's only got a root system like this. You know, so something like that, I could probably do a cup per year. And if I cut that in half, I'm going to do half cup when I first plant it in April, and then I'll come back in maybe June and just do that other cup. The foliar? So when I'm out with my trees, I'm cross and pollinate. So if I just plant max, and I don't have any other pollen in the area, any other varieties, I'm not going to get many apples. So what's another variety besides the Macintosh? Perfect. So I'm going to put a Macintosh in one part of the yard or the property, and within 15, 30 feet, I'm going to put a Delicious. And the pollen from those two pollinates each other. So that really helps. Around our area, we have a lot of wild apple trees. A lot of times it's not a problem because, you know, a crab apple, if you've got a crab apple, that will pollinate that Delicious or that Mac. Yep. How about bees? Yeah. So what I like to do is go out on a nice sunny spring day and you kind of stare up there, and if you just give it time and you let things settle, you'll notice besides your honeybees, you've got some bumblebees and you've got some flies and you've got some wasps, and all of those guys are doing the work that we want. So it doesn't have to just be that bumblebee or that honeybee that's doing that pollination. We got lots of different options. But bees are great. You know, those honeybees are great. So what can we do in our landscape to bring those bees in for our apple trees? Yeah. You got
No
it.
mow.
We've got some other things that they want to be in the area for at the right time, then they're also going to then go over and hang out at our apple trees. And that's a great way, that pollinator habitat.
But you don't spray any kind of pesticide, herbicide when the flowers are on the tree. I'm a beekeeper, and that just guarantees you.
Yeah.
You just killed all your pollinators.
Yep. So, as I'm thinking about it, when I'm getting ready, I've got what's called a dormant oil spray, and I'm going to do that here probably, well, this year it's probably earlier than later, and that's going to be a spray oil, and it's going to be some copper sulfate. But there's no foliage on the tree. The buds aren't open yet, and that kind of kills all the inoculum that's in the orchard and starts me at a nice baseline. I don't have a bunch of living spores. And then I'm going to stay out of that orchard like you're talking about. I'm going to let those buds open. I'm going to let the bees come in, let them do their work. Now that the bees are cleared out, then I probably have to get in there with that spray for fungicide because I got to worry about scab, and I've got green fruitworm. But great point. Let the bees do their work. Let them get out before you come back in.
You said scab and what? Green.
So scab is a fungus.
No, I know that, but what was the second thing?
Green fruitworm.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yep.
I didn't know.
Green fruitworm, plum cocciolio, those are two that usually emerge right around that pollination.
The type of oil you'd spray now or in its dormant season before it comes out, is that like a neem oil, or what would you be spraying?
It's called spray oil. Yeah. Yep. Yep. It is mixed with the copper sulfate. Yep. Yeah. So I go to the co-op and I get, you know, that jug of spray oil, and then I've got some copper sulfate, and I'm putting both in that tank mixed together.
Do you know if
I
those
think
are
so.
listed or if it's like technically?
I think that's what it was.
They make horticulture oil that is unlisted. Monterey Gardens makes some.
And neither one of those are going to be restricted use pesticides, so over the counter, anyone could go and purchase those types of things.
So another question about pruning. Can an apple tree tolerate renewal pruning, like more than a third? You see the shape is just so awful.
Yep.
You're like, I want to start over on this tree. Can you give us some insight on that?
Yeah, you know, the third is kind of that general rule. If you deviate from that, you certainly can. What you're probably going to see is a lot of regrowth that you're going to have to come back that next year and take care of. So when we really prune hard, the tree responds and it sends up a lot of those vegetative shoots. It just means either late in the summer or the next year. Remember Amy asked, how often are we pruning? Well, I'm gonna have to be in there that next year to clean that up, because I'm gonna see a lot of water spouts that came out. But it doesn't mean you can't do it.
And the tree might crash if you went too far, but that's an experiment.
Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta
No,
just take a
November.
chance.
You know, and the other side is, if you're taking too much, remember you've got a lot of root system you're trying to feed. There is a tipping point where I really went overboard and there's not enough photosynthetic surface to feed the rest of the tree. Guys, I want to make sure we get a chance to, put some loppers in people's hands and kind of.
Well, Mike, what did you
Taking off
talk?
the bed,
Talk
man.
talk to me. When you're
Probably should looking for see if I can borrow that chainsaw first. But looking at dead stuff.
Yeah.
The dead.
Is that your kind of your key takeaway, man? If you just get rid of the dead the first year.
Yeah. And I've got the center leader styles at the house. So I'm just kind of thinking things through of how that adapts to that. But I've let them go crazy. I haven't touched them. I haven't pruned anything out of them. So this is good for me. I'm going to go home like this afternoon.
Yeah.
I don't have too many of these old standards on my property. There's one.
Now you got like kind of just apple trees for your own personal use, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And deer use too. The deer
Yeah.
use more than I do. I
Yeah,
don't spray
right.
some. I'm not spraying them like Nate was going
Right.
over. So
Yeah.
most of them aren't the most appetizing. So it's more wildlife.
Yep, wildlife and a little bit here and
They're
there.
exotic, they're honeycrisp and things like that, but pretty much all just wildlife food. Yeah.
Boy, look at this one, huh? This one in the center. It's like, man, how is this tree even alive?
I know. Look at that thing.
Oh, wow.
That whole thing's got to come out. I would say I'll run that one by Nate there. What you'd want to do on that one?
Yeah. I got one kind of like that at my house.
Do you have a big old leaner like that?
It's like barely alive. I thought of almost just cutting the whole thing down, using the root system, and having it sprout a couple sprouts, and then pick a sprout.
Just go with it.
And
own
go
your
with it,
tree, so
yeah.
Really it is.
What?
You running right now?
Yeah.
Can we eat our food while we're
Yeah, eat your food. So what was your key takeaway, Larry? And thanks, by the way, for setting this whole thing up. You're the main guy for setting all it up.
Well, I think, Nate did a great job explaining a lot. I think just getting in and cutting all the dead wood the first year out of the tree, that's the number one. And then going back the second year and doing a little bit more. And from what I've seen doing it before, it really, triples the amount of apples you're going to have on a tree. And it's not just, for me, it's not just for the deer, it's for all the wildlife. And so that's what I got out of it.
What about you, Todd?
What I get from is don't be afraid to cut.
Right.
Because you're raising wood or raising apples, and he's not afraid to bring them down.
I think that's a big thing. You just have to start cutting. They'll grow.
I don't know. I need one of them ladders. What I need.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to cut.
Look at that tree.
I know, it's barely holding on.
Remember the ones in Baldwin at George King's property?
Yeah.
They looked like that. Is that about the size to get right there?
Those are my picking ladders, and I just use them for this too. That's an 8-foot. They make 6, 8, 10, 12.
Okay.
So 8s is what I find for the most part. Easy to throw in the back of the RTV.
These are a little sturdier than just a regular step ladder.
Yeah, that's what we got real
wider.
hilly.
Okay.
So we got a lot of relief topography going on in our place.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's an online thing?
Peach Ridge something?
Ridge. Yep.
I gotta write that down. Where would you go to get like new trees to buy?
So in that handout, we included 3 different sources. 2 are conservation districts, Emmett and Otsego, both a lot of times will have fruit trees, but I like to go through a commercial nursery. It's called Adams County Nursery, and Adams County, and I included that on that handout as well.
Okay, and then is there a certain kind of apples to get that you don't have to put pesticides on that are better than others?
So there are going to be some varieties and rootstocks that are going to be what they call disease resistant. It's not going to be perfect, but they're less prone to some of those things that some of those root rots and fire blight and things like that. So as you get in there, I think there's a selection or a way that you can search in there, and they'll give you some options, both tree variety and rootstock of disease resistant trees, and that's kind of what you'd want to focus on then if you don't want to worry about spraying as much.
Okay. And I didn't catch you to fertilize in time. If you were going to fertilize, you said March?
I'd like to get it, before they come out of dormancy,
Okay.
or even in the winter.
Okay.
Like I said, I did mine back in November, December. I want those nutrients to be soaked into the ground so when they come out of dormancy,
Okay.
I can start to take some up. I do a split application, so I come back again usually, late June somewhere and do the other half of that. So if I'm thinking 2 cups, I do 1 cup earlier, like in the winter, or very early spring, and another one early summer.
Does the cup size matter on your trees? Like that's a smaller tree than say this one, same 1 cup for every tree? Or whatever.
You can start to get into it, and there's a calculation based on the caliper size of the tree for how many pounds of. What I would recommend to start is 2 cups for these adult trees, and then I do a soil sample. Soil sample is going to cost you $12-15, and that's going to be, a good indicator of what's going on down there.
After you fertilize, you take a
Do it in the late summer.
Oh, okay. Late
Yep.
summer. Okay.
Have you ever came across like a tree that's barely, like this one ain't quite as good, but I saw one over there, and just cutting the whole thing down and then taking some of them suckers that come up the next year and trimming, getting 1 or 2 that you want, and like rebirthing the tree, starting
I haven't,
over?
but I know it's definitely a practice that people can do. So if you're not
like the tree's like almost just
You're gonna give up,
done
start over,
for,
and give
but
it a chance.
Yeah.
but like I'm thinking of just cutting it, using that rootstock that's already there, and then hopefully getting like a brand new little tree.
Yeah, another idea, see how I got 2 in here? These are both feeding the same root system.
Yep.
So instead of cutting both of these off, one thought would be,
Just doing one.
let's do one. Let's do that one right here and wait for those regrowth, and then select one of those. But for the next year or 2, let's leave this because that's going to keep feeding things.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to keep cutting this down and down. So maybe it's a 2-year process where the first year I cut this and some of that. That way I don't shade it out.
You mean cut it up higher, or you cut it? Or you're saying cut it high, or 2 foot off?
Cut it 2 foot off the ground. Cut it, enough where we've got a nice stump, and we're going to get some regrowth up there.
Okay.
I don't want the rabbits to be able to come through and just girdle it.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But at least then I can use this as a nutrient source for a couple years because it's going to feed that. So that, if you're experimenting, that might be something I'd try.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
What causes
And
a
thanks
tree-
for everything today.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Tree.
So, did you guys find this valuable? This?
Oh, absolutely. I've got some trees back in the woods at the house, and now I'm gonna head into trimming them up with some confidence.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and I have some young trees, and I have a very, very old maple tree. And then there's lots in my neighborhood that it's always like you walk by and you're like, wow, maybe in the neighborhood we could have a pruning party and just like get things under control.
Nice. What was your key takeaway from 1 or 2 key things that stood out to you?
Do you have?
I think I've read a lot about it, but it's nice to see it in person, to actually get the saw in my hand and look at how you stand here for a long time and look at the tree and try to figure it out, and like you said, do the best you can.
And then I think the height to trim kind of natural trees, not dwarf trees, but the ones that are years and years old. And then how much to trim out and not to be afraid to be a bit aggressive. So I think that's what it would take.
Yeah, I mean, look at this tree now. I mean, it's just amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Walked out,
Right.
taken out. And then the idea that when the trunk is like looks like it's mostly dead, the tree is still functional.
Right.
Yeah.
Good producer for at least a decade.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I got to get a before and after of that one because it's just a total transformation.
Amazing what they did there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's good stuff.
Well, thank you guys.
You bet.
Here is the after of that tree. And boy, is that is a big difference.
Well, I think, there's nurseries in California, and I know that one worry is if you get that tree that's in that, different latitude.
So, did you find this valuable?
Yes, we have a bunch of ancient apple trees on our property, and they haven't been tended to in a long time. We'd like to keep them around and healthy. So, yeah, actually, I learned a ton about what to look for and where to start at least.
Nice. And what was like your one key takeaway, one to two things that really stood out to you?
It's all new to me, so there's a whole lot of things there. Basic stuff, just minimizing the pruning, kind of the structure that you're searching for, which branches are destined to fail and which are destined to thrive in the long run, and that's a good starting point for me.
All right, thanks.
You're most welcome. Thank you.